The story begins with an event that defines Eve's entire life. Imagine her as a child, her world peaceful, living with her father, Javier.
Yeah.
Suddenly, armed men burst in, hunting Javier. He manages to hide young Eve just before facing them. Their leader, a figure known only as the Chancellor, arrives.
This isn't random.
No, not at all. There's history here. Javier was tied to the Ruska Roma, while Eve's mother was connected to the Chancellor's cult.
Right. And the Chancellor claims Javier stole his wife from the cult, which, ultimately led to her death. This backstory is critical. Javier wasn't just some guy with a target on his back. He was a man who left one powerful organization, the Ruska Roma, for love with someone from a rival, intensely insular group. The Chancellor's motivation is pure revenge. Not just for the perceived theft of his wife, but the loss he suffered because of it.
So it establishes this deep, bitter rivalry between these two groups that predates Eve's birth.
And tragically shapes her future, yeah.
Right. And the Chancellor offers Javier this horrific choice. Commit suicide and Eve lives, or fight and both die.
It's terrible.
Javier, in a desperate final act to protect Eve, prepares to end his own life. But Eve cries out. Seeing her, Javier pivots, takes down the cultists nearby, but he's shot. He still manages to get himself and Eve outside before a bomb detonates, killing the rest of the cultists, but he dies there right in front of his daughter.
Awful.
When Eve is later found, she's in a hospital, holding on to a spinning ballerina toy. It's such a striking, poignant detail that ties her back to that innocence just ripped away.
That image of the ballerina toy is incredibly powerful. It really foreshadows the path she'll be forced onto, doesn't it? A path where grace and brutality become completely intertwined.
After that unthinkable loss, Eve is found and brought to Winston Scott. Winston, seeing the connection to Javier and probably acting on, existing understandings within this world, connects her with her father's family, the Ruska Roma. Eve accepts, and Winston takes her to the director.
And this marks the next phase. 12 years.
12 years of rigorous, all-consuming training under the director's watchful eye. It's an intense regimen, blending the discipline of classical ballet with lethal combat and gunplay, guided by a formidable trainer named Nogi. She trains until her feet bleed, just utterly dedicated.
And Nogi calls her students Kikimora, right? These spirits from mythology. She tells Eve they are good or bad depending on who they inhabit.
So it's not just poetic language.
No, it's defining their purpose.
Yeah.
They are being forged into instruments, potential assassins, but also performers, blending artistry with deadly skill.
And the training demands everything, extreme isolation.
Oh, absolutely. Eve has virtually no friends, just one fellow student, Tatiana, and even Tatiana is eventually dismissed by the director. Basically deemed not capable enough. It shows you the brutal standards of this world. Only the most dedicated and skilled survive.
And then a moment where she crosses paths with a legend. John Wick visits the Ruska Roma, seeking assistance from the director. This happens around the time of Chapter 3.
Right, during that period.
Eve, deep in her training, sees him and approaches. She asks him a fundamental question that gets right to the heart of her predicament. How does someone like her get into the field and do what he does?
John's answer here is fascinating, I think, and it tells us a lot about the nuances of this universe. He doesn't just tell her how to get into the field.
No.
He tells her she could always walk out, or, crucially, she could make the choice herself to be like him.
That choice theme again.
Exactly. It speaks to that recurring theme. While circumstances and legacies pull you, there's often a critical element of personal agency, of choosing your path even within constraints. Eve isn't just a product of her training or her past. This conversation highlights that she chooses this life, in a way.
Following that encounter, the director sends Eve on her very first field mission. Her task, protect a young woman named Katla Park from a target named Il Seong.
Okay.
She treks Katla to a nightclub. When Sesong and his men attack, Eve steps in. She takes on multiple attackers, showcasing the deadly efficiency of her training.
How do you get into practice?
And then confronts Seong. How does she finish him? By stabbing him repeatedly with the peen of a hammer, then gets Katla out safely.
That first mission is proof of concept. It demonstrates her lethal capability, confirms she's ready to operate as a fully fledged Kikimora assassin. It shows the training wasn't just, for show, it was preparation for extreme violence.
Right. Fast forward a couple of months, Eve has completed another hit, leaving an apartment when her car is ambushed. She takes out the attackers with brutal efficiency. But as she's finishing, she notices a crucial detail on one of the gunman's wrists, an X-shaped scar. It's the exact same mark she remembers seeing on the men who killed her father. This small detail just ignites the dormant fire of her past, shifting her focus entirely.
Changes everything.
What does she do? In a bold move, she cuts off the gunman's hand and takes it directly to the director, demanding answers.
This is the absolute turning point. That X-scar isn't just a symbol, it's a direct link to her childhood trauma. The director recognizes it instantly. It's the mark of the cult that killed Eve's father.
But here's the catch.
Right. The director refuses to help. Why? Because of a long-standing truce between the cult and the Ruska Roma. They've agreed to stay out of each other's affairs. Exactly. The director isn't willing to risk breaking that fragile balance for Eve's personal vendetta. This shows you how the larger political landscape and the established rules of this world can override personal desires, even within the same organization.
But Eve isn't someone who takes no for an answer, especially not now. With revenge finally in her sights, she decides to seek help outside the Ruska Roma structure.
Yep.
She travels to the Continental Hotel in New York, checks in with Charon, seeks out Winston Scott. How does she convince the notoriously cautious Winston to help her wade into such dangerous waters?
She gives him the gold token, the one he gave her as a child. A powerful symbol in this world. The marker. That gold token isn't just a keepsake, it's a marker of obligation, a form of currency representing a favor owed or a promise made. By presenting it, Eve is leveraging the established rules of this society.
So Winston agrees.
Winston's agreement to help, by assigning her to track Daniel Pine, shows his willingness to respect these old-world commitments, though he does it indirectly, probably to avoid direct conflict with the cult himself. Pine is a potential key into the cult's network.
Okay, so Eve tracks Pine to the Continental in Prague. She enters his room, guns drawn, only to find him with his young daughter, Ella. It's a tense standoff.
Yeah, very tense. Weapons are drawn.
But Eve lowers hers when she states her mission is only about the cult.
This is a moment where Eve demonstrates she's operating by a code, at least initially. Her focus is singular, her vendetta is personal, aimed specifically at those connected to her father's death, not at innocent parties or unrelated targets.
But things escalate dramatically because someone spots her. Lena, who works for the Chancellor, sees Eve in the hotel lobby and reports back.
Oh boy.
And what the Chancellor orders next is a shocking violation of the most sacred rule of the Continental.
The big one.
He orders his cult members to attack Eve on the hotel grounds where shedding blood is absolutely forbidden.
This cannot be stressed enough. Attacking on Continental grounds is a direct defiance of a foundational rule of this world. It's the one thing that allows disparate assassins to exist in relative peace under one roof.
So the consequences are immediate.
Well, swift and severe, though delayed for some. Pine's bounty doubles, potentially drawing more hunters who might also disregard the rules. The cultists storm Pine's room.
Right.
Pine uses a booby trap on one, and he and Eve fight off the others, managing to get outside with Ella, but they are eventually overwhelmed and incapacitated. And devastatingly, Ella is kidnapped by the cultists.
Oh, no.
This act shows the cult's utter disregard for the rules and drags Eve deeper into their conflict.
After that chaos, what happens to Eve? She wakes up, and crucially, she is spared execution. Why?
Because she didn't break the cardinal rule. She didn't kill anyone on the Continental grounds. Simple as that.
But the cult members.
The cult members who were captured, however, are executed summarily right in front of her eyes. The owner simply tells Eve she needs to check out. Leave.
That's a brutal, immediate lesson in the absolute power of the rules in this world.
Absolutely. Her life is spared solely because she, unlike the cultists, adhered to the Continental Code. It underscores that following the established laws, even amidst violence and chaos, can be the difference between life and death.
She goes to see Frank, a gun shop owner. While they're talking, cult members attack the shop. Frank is shot in the hand.
Ouch.
But Eve defends him, taking out the attackers with the skills she honed.
This proves Eve has made her choice definitively. She's defying the director, operating independently, relying on her training and determination. And her defense of Frank is like an act of reciprocation that exists within the informal economy of favors in this world, separate from the high table or big organizational rules.
And in return for defending him, Frank provides her with crucial information, the supposed hidden location of the cult's stronghold.
Where is it?
Nestled away in the Austrian mountains, in the town of Hallstatt.
Okay, into the mountains.
Eve arrives in Hallstatt. It quickly becomes evident that Frank's info was accurate. The town is swarming with cultists.
Oh, it's not just a hideout then.
No. She enters a tavern and is immediately recognized by gunmen. She fights and kills them, but more arrive when the tavern employee, Agnetha, calls for backup. Eve battles Agnetha and other cult members, kills Agnetha,
She's walked directly into the lion's den, basically, a town filled with the enemy. This isn't just a small outpost, it's a major operational base, confirming the scale of the threat she's facing.
As she pushes deeper into the town, she's eventually taken down, and as she's subdued, her jacket is torn open, revealing her Riska Roma tattoo.
Ah, the mark.
The Chancellor sees it and instantly realizes who she is, Javier's daughter, back for revenge after all these years.
That tattoo is her mark, her history made visible. It connects her directly to her past and clarifies her purpose to the Chancellor. No more hiding.
This leads to a direct confrontation with the Chancellor and a woman named Lena. And here is a truly shocking reveal. The Chancellor tells Eve that Lena is her long-lost older sister.
Wow, okay. Didn't see that coming.
Lena's motivation for being part of the cult and her animosity towards Eve is rooted in deep resentment. She blames Javier for taking Eve away for a better life while leaving her behind with the cult.
And blames him for their mother's death, too.
Yeah, believing it was his fault for separating her from the cult in the first place.
This is just the twisted legacy of the cult's ideology. Lena represents the path Eve might have taken, trapped and indoctrinated. Her resentment shows how the cult warps even family bonds. It's tragic.
The Chancellor then reveals his plan for Ella, the girl kidnapped in Prague. He intends to train her, claiming she was chosen, contrasting this with the Ruska Roma students who, he says, make their own choices.
Highlighting that core ideological divide again. The cult believes in destiny and control, while the Ruska Roma emphasize training and personal choice. Or at least frame it that way.
The Chancellor makes a final, brutal decision. He leaves Eve and Lena to fight, seemingly to settle their sisterly score, but then orders his men to kill both of them regardless.
Of course he does. Ruthless.
Grenades are thrown into the room. Lena is killed, but Eve, miraculously, survives the blast.
Lena's tragic end, caught between a warped sense of loyalty and familial resentment, just underscores the Chancellor's utter ruthlessness. No one is indispensable, and Eve's survival, once again, highlights her extraordinary resilience, but she's lost the chance to connect with the only family she had left.
Eve's actions have triggered a major crisis in the underworld. The Chancellor calls the director, declaring Eve's attack an act of war between their organizations.
The truce is broken.
Exactly. The director insists she didn't send Eve, but to avert a full-scale conflict, she agrees to send someone to stop her. The deadline is midnight.
This is the immediate, devastating consequence of Eve ignoring the director's order and pursuing her vendetta. Her personal revenge has escalated into an international incident, threatening to ignite a war between two powerful groups. The director has to act decisively to contain the situation, even if it means neutralizing one of her own.
As Eve prepares for a final stand in Hallstatt, outnumbered and against the clock, someone appears. It's John Wick.
Sent by the director to stop her.
But when Eve refuses to back down, absolute in her resolve for revenge, they fight. It's an intense battle, a clash of two forces driven by pain that ends in a tactical draw.
They're evenly matched, in a way.
And then something unexpected happens. John agrees to let Eve confront the Chancellor, but only before that midnight deadline.
This moment tells us so much about John and the unwritten codes of this world. John, who understands loss and the drive for vengeance perhaps more than anyone, seems to recognize something of himself in Eve.
Yeah, you feel that.
He chooses to respect her mission, within a limited time frame, overriding the director's explicit order. It's a powerful example of how personal history and mutual respect can sometimes bend, though not break, the strict hierarchy and rules of this society.
The clock is ticking. Eve enters the town square as the Chancellor rallies every assassin he has. It's pure chaos.
All hands on deck for the cult.
Eve grabs a flamethrower, cutting a fiery path through the cultists. She confronts Dex, the Chancellor's right-hand man, who also has a flamethrower.
Flamethrower fight.
Eve runs out of fuel but grabs a fire hose to counter his flames. As they face off, John Wick, observing from a distance,
he assists,
snipes Dex's flamethrower tank, causing him to explode and clearing the final path for Eve.
This final sequence is a masterclass in tactical survival and unexpected alliance. Eve uses her environment and available weapons against overwhelming odds, and John's intervention is perfectly timed. He doesn't kill the Chancellor himself, but ensures Eve can reach her target.
Eve reaches the Chancellor just as he's trying to escape with Ella. She takes out his remaining guards. It's the final showdown.
The moment of truth.
The Chancellor starts to monologue, telling her that killing him won't change anything, that revenge is pointless. But Eve isn't interested in a philosophical debate.
No time for that.
She simply interrupts his speech with a decisive bullet to the head.
A definitive, brutal end. Eve rejects his fatalistic view and takes her revenge, direct and absolute, bringing 12 years of pain to a violent conclusion.
With the Chancellor dead, Ella is rescued and reunited with her father, Pine, at the hospital. So what happens to Eve?
Where does she go from here?
She checks into the New York Continental, a place of neutrality, a safe harbor within the storm of the underworld. She's later seen at a ballet performance watching Katla, the woman she protected on her very first mission, dance.
Rescuing Ella and reuniting her with Pine provides a sense of closure for that part of the story.
Suddenly, flashing on screens around the ballet theater, a notification appears. A $5 million contract has been put out on Eve Macaro.
Oh.
She looks around and sees other men in the theater getting the same notification on their phones. What does she do? She leaves, quickly.
And there it is, the immediate, unavoidable consequence of her actions. By killing the Chancellor, she broke the fragile truce between the Risk Aroma and the cult. That violation, that disruption of the established order, has made her the target.
So revenge has its price.
Her revenge is complete, but the price is her own head, thrusting her directly into the crosshairs of every killer seeking a payday. It shows how deeply personal actions are intertwined with the macro-level rules and consequences of this world.
She got her revenge, the thing that consumed 12 years of her life, but at what cost? How does this new reality with a $5 million contract on her head and the entire underworld suddenly looking at her as a target fundamentally change the kind of choices she'll have to make from this moment forward?
Exactly. It highlights the cyclical nature of violence and consequence in this world. Achieving one goal doesn't grant peace. It often just opens the door to an entirely new and potentially more dangerous challenge. What's next for her?
Absolutely. We'll have to see. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.